So you'll know you're in a trauma bond when you start obsessing over this person and you feel like you need to get that text from them to feel good inside and to feel safe in your own body. If not, you're in this like whirlwind of anxiety. And I know I can relate to this myself when it feels so intense and you think that this is your person because they make you feel in such an extreme way. But it's actually that they are triggering your attachment style and not in a good way. And it's easy to think that this is love. And you'll know it's not love because you actually feel dysregulated in your nervous system, meaning like you feel like you can't sleep, you can't eat, and you are just fixated on getting them to answer you, to like you. You're walking on eggshells. And then it ends up actually, taking up all your focus in your day. And that's kind of how, we get into the trauma bonds is we think that this strong pull of like the fireworks, like crazy chemistry means that this is my person. But your person is actually going to make you feel safe, not anxious.
Right. And it's crazy. And I've definitely been in that dance before where that overthinking or over fixating on the person, it feels euphoric in your body, even if it's a good thing, even if it's not why haven't they texted me back? Even if it's just like, oh my God, they're so amazing. And it takes up all of your day or all of your awareness, and confusing that with love because you have all these big feelings when actually like what you're talking about, it's like, wait a second, I'm actually not safe. I don't feel grounded. I don't feel in the present moment in my day. And sure that, when you fall in love, there is an uplift of like, you generally feel better throughout the day, but it's not fixated on the other person so much. And I think that's a clear little distinction there.
Yes. And then another part of you're putting them on a pedestal. So you don't see any of their flaws. You're like idealizing them. And it's almost like you entered this trance of they're perfect. And then that's why you try and seek their approval so much and try and like fix yourself, morph yourself into like who they want you to be. And then it becomes this vicious cycle because in the beginning, let's say if someone is maybe more narcissistic or toxic, they will love bomb you. And that's where it can feel so addictive because it does feel really soothing. And then you're just constantly going back for that next high. And then without it, then you go through those withdrawals of feeling depressed. And when you're feeling like the depression, it feels like they are the only one that can make you feel better. And that's what, gets people stuck on them. Right? Like I just need to hear from them, and get that validation. Mostly because it's coming from that part of you that doesn't feel good enough.
Right. And it's almost like that's why love bombing works. Or I guess, could you go into that a little bit of like, why does love bombing really grasp and turn into that addiction type of thing with somebody where they kind of go into this trauma bond?
Yeah. So love bombing can actually happen in two different ways, depending on the dynamic. So I've experienced both kinds, so I can speak well on this. First one is when they're more a covert narcissist. So a covert is more like they're stuck in like a victim mentality story. When you first meet them, they just trauma dump on you. They make all these sob stories about things that happen to them, which are things that they're usually doing to others. And so they reel you in by making you feel really guilty and bad for them. And then this triggers like your own stuff of wanting to fix and rescue your parent. Because let's say if you have a depressed parent, that's unsafe for you. You need to make sure that they're happy, that they're okay, so that you can get your needs met. So then you feel responsible for their well-being. And so it's not always, the crazy love bombing. Sometimes it can actually just be through making you feel really sorry for them. And then your general love bombing is like more overt narcissist where they're grandiose and they're just showering you with like these nonstop gestures of love, of affection, like confessing their love to you. And you can tell it from a mile away because they will always kind of say like the same words of, I never felt this way before, you're perfect, you're the one. And those words are not a bad thing to say, but when you don't know someone at all, that's where, it's showing you it's more manipulation versus this person has a genuine connection with you. They built that over time, and then they're saying those things. So the reason why that can really reel someone in, and when it happens, we're not fully consciously aware of it because it's almost like it grabs at our wounds, and not in a negative way in the love bombing stage. It can actually feel really good, really soothing. So in childhood, you have those primary core needs. Like you need to feel seen, you need to feel heard and validated for who you are, like for your authentic self. So that's not just something that you can go without. It's like you need that to know, hey, I'm good enough. I deserve to be in this world. I deserve to like have love, be loved. And then if we don't get that, then we like have to learn to get external validation to survive that. And so when you meet someone in that love bombing phase, they will mirror back to everything that you did not get, all your unmet needs in the highest degree possible, that no one else can take you on such a high level. Like that is like pure euphoria, because it's almost like that fairy tale, that moment that you wanted for someone to come rescue you, or your inner child did, it's now given to you. And to give that up can feel impossible, because it's almost like it hooked you in, it made you dependent. And because you can't feel that on your own, then it's like they are your only source for that. And then when they take it away, you're not chasing after them, you're chasing after that feeling they're giving you that you're lacking within yourself.
Which I'm sure is one big reason why it's so hard to get over situations like this.
Oh my gosh. Yes, you can be stuck on them for years, 2 years, 4 years, because it's not necessarily like, oh, time needs to pass and then I'm over them. Time could suppress your wounds, make them dormant where you don't feel them anymore. But the moment you're triggered, well, there you go. It's resurfacing. And it's almost like because they gave you that love bombing, your brain associates them with the cure to all your issues. So as soon as you're feeling like depressed, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling just shame, bad about yourself, your brain will go, oh, remember, they were the ones to take this all away for you. So then we think, oh, I keep thinking about this person. It must mean like they're my soulmates and I need to message them or get them back somehow. But no, it's because even if we're not in contact with that person, those thoughts produce a physiological effect in your body. So if I'm, thinking about all the good times we had together, how they made me feel, my body's then producing those emotional responses. And then once again, actually reinforcing that they are the cure. And yeah, so it's not time that's going to make you just get over your ex. It's actually getting to the root of it, because they're the symptom, right? They're the symptom of all those unmet needs from childhood, which means you would need to actually address the original core wound where you weren't feeling seen and heard, so that you don't need that as a band-aid anymore.
Does that same thing happen with what you talked about before with the covert narcissism, where they're going into this, like making you feel sorry for them story? How does that become addictive, and the same thing happen here? Or is that a little bit of a different psychological effect?
Okay, so that one I have 5 years experience of being stuck with a covert narcissist, and it is really addictive because, let's say you had a parent that just never was there for you, never changed for you. And then you finally get this feeling that, oh my gosh, I can finally change this person. And it feels so soothing because it's like you're finally getting that love you never received. But then it becomes a whole bunch of self sacrifice, burnout. You lose yourself. I mean, towards the end, I was completely a shell of myself. And I think, like, that is your version of love when you learn to take care of your parent growing up. So it doesn't feel weird. You don't question it at first until you're probably on the floor, just have nothing left to give. And you're like, oh, maybe this is not how a relationship is supposed to work. And at the same time, one part of it is, if they need me, then they can't leave me. So in that way, it is very, very soothing to, the attachment, the abandonment wound. Because if they are needing me for all these things, and I'm also enabling them, so they're not learning how to do it for themselves, then my anxious attachment will for sure be, won't be activated. Versus in another relationship where if they don't need me, they can leave me at any moment. So it's like soothing, but in a different way, where you really have to hone in and look at it. As soon as you start telling yourself, oh, they can change, they're not that bad, oh, but they have so much potential, this is when you're like triggered in your fix it mode. And that is never, like, it's not going to be a healthy relationship unless the other person is aware of it and willing to work on their stuff. It can't just be a one-way street. It can't just be like, oh, well, I'll work on my caretaking part. The other person has to be in full agreement that, they have those tendencies, right, to be in that victim state.
Yeah. What does that look like to actually have somebody who's on board with that change versus them saying they're aware of it, and wanting to, yeah, cool, let's do it. And then nothing happening.
Yeah, because someone could tell you all the words you want to hear, especially if it's like a reoccurring cycle. They know what you want in order to keep them around. You told them so many times, and that means like they already know what to do. They're just choosing not to do it because you are accepting what they're giving you. Well, why would they change if you're accepting, like, it and enabling it? They'll just continue with it. But, when someone is giving you a genuine apology, it does not just sound like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, or, well, it's because you did this, then I had no choice but to do this. Or, okay, but you also do this, so you need to change too. And if they're also changing because you told them to, or you gave them an ultimatum, then if that's their motivation, as soon as they know that you're back in the relationship with them, they're going to just stop doing it because their motivation for it is gone. So they have you now. And then it just goes into like this vicious cycle of, I'm going to leave you, you're not changing. And then they promise they're going to change. And then just that cycle can go on forever.
Yeah. Mostly because that happen? Like, why are so many people trying to coach their partners, do you think, to changing?
Yeah, well, because it can feel really uncomfortable when if I can't fix or change this person, it means they potentially never loved me. And it really comes down to the meanings we're attaching to what's happening. So if I have, childhood trauma and I never felt lovable for someone to really show up for me, if I once again can't get this person to be who I need them to be, it must mean that I'm unlovable. No one ever is going to love me. This is my only shot. I need to prove to myself that I am worthy through this person. So to just give up on that can, start to actually feel like a life or death situation because it regresses you back to childhood. You are reliant, dependent on your parents' approval, love. And if you don't get it, you will literally try everything to get it. Therefore, giving this person chance after chance. And so you're in this childhood looping cycle. And it's not necessarily about this person. It's just mirroring back your own stuff, which not everyone, is willing to look at.
That's important to highlight. It's like, it's not about the other person. And so often our psychology can go to, well, they're not showing up this way, they need to change this thing, or this is their potential, and the focus is so much on the other person, and it's not on, well, how am I showing up and what's happening internally here. And so I think that one of the biggest
Yes.
shifts that you're suggesting is people shift their focus to yourself, and like, how am I showing up? What's happening inside? What, like, is this the type of relationship that I want to be in? Like, whoa, is this how I want to feel? Am I actually feeling safe? And then in that introspection, you can start to recognize how you can really make changes, or I guess really make changes and leave the relationship. But like, how does somebody recognize, and we've been talking a lot about it, they recognize they're in this pattern. And a lot of what you're talking about is like trying to have fulfillment for your insecurities, or like dancing around, well, don't make me feel bad. And
Mhm.
how does somebody start to make the shift then into a more stable, secure relationship where it's not around avoiding triggers or insecurities?
Yeah, so I definitely think that you have to have someone reflect it back to you, because I know when I was in that situation, I didn't even know I was doing that.
Mhm.
That was just what I knew. It was super unconscious until someone said, like, why do you keep trying to change this person? Like, you're not loving them for who they are. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, you're right. Like, that's almost like conditional love. And then so I started to reflect on, also, what am I getting out of this? If I know this person's not for me, clearly, but I still keep trying to make them be the person I need. And yeah, so I think, it's a very unconscious coping mechanism. So having someone actually like reflect it back to you, like, this is actually what you're doing, and then gaining more education around that, and that, hey, because what can also happen is when you're like someone that saves people, you think that you are the healthy person in the relationship. I'm doing everything. I'm so kind. I'm so giving. I sacrifice everything for them. But like, hey, that's unhealthy towards yourself. You're abusive towards yourself. And so that has to be, deconstructed as well. It's, no, you're not being kind. You're actually trying to unconsciously manipulate this person into loving you. Not that you have bad intentions with it. It's like, sometimes you just don't even know you're doing it. Like, you're just on repeat from your childhood. And if they trigger that stuff, it can literally go on for forever until you seek help for it, until you realize, wow, like, nothing is changing and working. And if I'm seeing that pattern in every one of my relationships, I have to be the common denominator.
And I talk to a lot of women who understand that that's where they're at. They're like, I know I'm in a toxic relationship. I know I'm in a trauma bond and I can't leave. Why is it so hard to leave? And how does somebody actually shift or make that decision?
Oh, yeah, trauma bonds are one of the hardest things to break. They even say, it's harder than like any drug addiction, because it ties into your survival. So the reason why trauma bonding is so hard to leave is because the dynamic of the hot and cold behavior, gets you physiologically addicted to their validation. And it's almost like you're dependent on them now to regulate your nervous system for you. It's almost like it's a complete hijacking. And they will trigger your wounds in the biggest way possible. That's why, if you compare it to other relationships, you're like, I've never felt this way before. Because they, with their devaluation, their discarding of you, dismissing of you, it's so extreme that it unearths like your primal fear of abandonment. And this is why you feel so freaking dysregulated. And when they give you the love bombing, it's like, I can relax, I can breathe, like, I feel a sense of relief in my body. And when that wound is triggered, there's no sense of time when it comes to trauma. So your body is reliving it as if you're in that situation as a child and needing to keep this person for survival. So letting go of them will then feel like a life or death situation. It feels too dangerous. Not logically, though. It's happening very, like, at an emotional level. And that's why no amount of I know better, they're bad for me, researching about narcissists will really get you out of that cycle, because it's not a logical knowledge issue. It's not your intellect that's keeping you stuck. And what I try and tell people is it's not the act of leaving that's hard for you because you should leave. It's more the emotions that this will trigger up within you. And now you're left to deal with it and face it. And it can feel so paralyzing. And I'll give just an example of like my own story of what kept me stuck is the moment I would try and leave him, I would feel the most intense amount of panic, grief, depression, sadness I ever felt in my entire life. Like I literally felt like I was going to die. And so, but when I would go back to him, it would numb it all out. So then I thought, oh, this is my soulmate. I can't live without him. But it wasn't that. It was more, this trauma reenactment from childhood. And so as long as those emotions, outweigh that fear and the damage of staying, it's going to keep you stuck, because your body is going, oh well, being alone and feeling these emotions of abandonment is way too scary, way too unsafe. Let me go back to the attachment so I don't have to feel this. So yeah, that's how deep it goes.
Right. So it's really about like those deeper insecurities, feelings you're talking about, like that's actually getting numbed out by the relationship in some ways. And so leaving it would then face all of that. And I'm sure
Yes.
also psychologically, then it's like, well, who am I and what is love? And
Mhm.
you get to wrestle with a lot of those
Yes.
beliefs because it's all getting ruptured and fractured. Like your belief of reality starts to get fractured. I mean, I even experienced this leaving trauma bonds myself, of like the season after I actually left was probably some of the darkest times in my life, because I was so deep in, well, what does this mean about me and who am I and what is love really? And has this all been a lie? And then, well, I had to really wrestle with the beliefs of all that and the uncomfortable feelings of feeling my deep insecurities of not being enough, always getting things wrong, whatever it was for me. And a lot of it, honestly, shame for going down that route and being quote unquote, how could I not see it? All the things. And so I really just want to also highlight that for anybody listening who's in a season of that. Like what's on the other side of actually unpacking all of that, though, is a firm foundation where you can be stable in something that's real. So once somebody
Oh my God, yeah.
sees this shift, how do they then start to even navigate the aftermath of all this?
Yeah, I mean, it will feel worse at first when you do leave, because the thing that was numbing it out is no longer there. So you're just sitting in all of that. So to any addiction, because this is pretty much addiction recovery when you're going through it, is yeah, learning how to feel safe in your body, learning how to process these very overwhelming emotions. Because the addiction to go back is, oh my God, I need them to take these feelings away. So if I can learn how to actually regulate and work through these emotions on my own, or like with a therapist that's trained in it, then that is really your way out. But it's also like more stickier than that, because they lied about who they were. And now you're grieving not just one person, but, pretty much two things. You're grieving, the fairy tale. Then you're grieving the loss of the future faking, all the things that they promised to you. Then you're grieving your loss of like your own sense of self, that you gave up in that relationship. You're grieving all the abandonment and betrayal you did to yourself. It's just, so yeah, there's not like, oh, 2 months, 3 months, then you're good. I tell people, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but wait at least a good year, because you just went through something so traumatizing that left you broken, and now you need time to rebuild yourself. And it's not a bad thing to wait that long, because now if you are actually dealing with what you've been escaping from, now when you actually go out in the world and start dating, you're not going to attract the same type of person. And one thing that can also happen is when we leave these relationships, we can start to feel so numb inside. Like, I remember I couldn't feel anything towards him anymore. So I was like, oh, I must just be over it. Let's get into the next relationship. But clearly it's because when you've been through so much trauma, your body will just disconnect you from all of it. So I will repeat, trauma does not heal just because time has passed. You still need to go and deal with what even made you susceptible to them in the first place, because it will happen again. It's not consciously happening, it's unconsciously happening. So the moment you're back in a similar situation, all that hurt and betrayal, it's going to repeat itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of, I have a saying of like, okay, are you healed or just absent from triggers? Like, are you just pushing away your love life? Because
Oh,
it's actually, yeah, are you just not dating and you're not in any intimate connection, or are you actually healed? And I think the yes, there's a season where you may need to push that away. I mean, I went 3 years celibate for a reason, to actually do work on myself. And then when I found myself getting back in connections, not all, but some of those same things kept happening. And I was like, dang, you can't just remove yourself and then you're healed and you're back in it. Like, but on a base level, like you
that's so
said, what
true.
was showing up was different. How I was showing up was different. And that was the biggest like green flag of like, okay, I did some good work, and there's obviously more work to do as is life.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a really good point you just made, because yeah, you can try and avoid all connections, all relationships, like people avoid dating for so long. But then you realize that once you get close to people again, all that stuff just gets re-triggered to the surface. And there's no such thing as being fully healed. And like, we're not a project that needs to be fixed and worked on all the time just to be in a healthy relationship. But I think what you start to realize is, okay, I might have these triggers and it's normal because I'm human, everyone has insecurities, but now I know how to navigate through them so that they don't drive those same patterns anymore, where like I'm not shutting my partner down or trying to like control everything they're doing or trying to fix them. Or, you know, let's say when you know how to actually regulate your own emotions, if I see that this person is showing red flags, I can now choose myself because I know how to sit with that discomfort of, losing that connection.
Right. Because then you're not fearing abandonment so much.
Yes, yeah. And so I truly believe that a big part of healing that fear of abandonment is learning how to feel safe in your body on your own with those emotions. Because, um when you're healing, it's not that you never have big emotions or big triggers that come up. That is literally BS. But now you don't need so many things to try and escape them to feel better, because you actually know now how to feel better and to self-soothe. And so you have that self-trust, that intimacy with yourself. It's not just found through us like an external thing or a person anymore.
Right. Right. So when it comes to this whole process of breaking this addiction and getting out of this cycle, I mean, you mentioned treating it like an addiction. So what are some ways in which, if you're open to sharing, you guide your clients, or things that you share that people actually do, maybe a protocol to follow or something, if there is one, of
Hmm.
like, this is how you can break the addiction? Because one thing that I, in my own life, like with this, recognized was like, oh, this is like a chemical addiction in my body. And so I
Hmm.
depersonalized it a little bit. And I also like stopped ruminating in my head about understanding things. And I was like, I just need to get
Yeah.
sober. So like, what are some things that you could share?
Yes. Yeah. And what you said was just like a really, really good point. Because when we still think that all this is tied up in that person, then we're going to try and, yeah, ruminate, or like, how can I fix this? Maybe like it was something I did. And so when you're going through that, addiction and you're wanting them, it's not per se them you're wanting, it's the relief from all these feelings that you're now forced to confront. And so, like, definitely you need to go no contact, but that can feel really tough at first. So, but when you're set up with tools on how to actually self soothe these big emotions, then you get back in the driver's seat of your behaviors, right? Because as long as these big emotions are overriding all your logic, you're going to continue to like reach out to them or answer them when they hoover you back in. And hoover just means like they're, trying to start that cycle all over again with you by telling you whatever you want to hear. Um, so yeah, usually I, guide clients through using something called EFT. So it's an emotional freedom technique. And this helps to calm that anxiety in your body. You can also use it when you're feeling like lonely or shut down. And it helps you to feel more safe in the emotion. Because, feeling safe in emotion isn't just, oh, I soak in the emotion and I just become the emotion. That will then actually make you feel worse and relive, those emotions. But yeah, the EFT helps you to actually be with, release, feel safe, and not get stuck in it. So that is like what you want to be able to do. I might feel these emotions, but I'm not getting stuck in it where now I need that relief from them. I need them to take me out of this feeling. No, like I actually have resources now where I can do that for myself. But it obviously takes time. Like when you're learning these emotional regulation tools, it's not like I do it once and now like I'm a pro at it. Like it takes time to learn this, but the more you do, then the easier it becomes. And then the next step is connecting to your inner child, because this is all stemming from your inner child. So how can I start to give that love, that validation that this part of me is seeking through this person, so that they are not my only source for it? And sometimes, people do this more at a conscious level, but I think, what leaves it incomplete is doing it at a subconscious level. And what I mean by that is, instead of just repeating affirmations to myself, I'm actually going to connect to the feelings in my body. I'm going to get a visual of this part of me. I'm going to feel into like what age they're stuck at. And basically you're reparenting that part of you. So then it's no longer stuck in that feeling of anxiety, abandonment, the fear of being alone, because it's not your adult self that's, feeling that way. It's this part of you. So when you connect to the source of it, that's what actually turns off the cravings, because it's like the cravings is wanting to feel safe and relief from the feelings. So inner child work, EFT tapping, learning how to self-soothe, and the reason why we get stuck in our feelings is because we're trying to rationalize what's happening, right? Or we're trying to make so much sense of our feelings that it just gets stuck on repeat. So learning how to actually focus on the emotion itself and to tap through it will help you to really get unstuck from that state.
Right. It's feeling the feelings instead of thinking about the feelings in a lot of ways, or thinking about and rationalizing and understanding. You said something along the lines of like needing to understand more knowledge isn't actually going to save you from this.
No, it's not. It's going to get you just more stuck. And I'm focusing on the external instead of the internal. And, like look at the difference if I were to experience sadness and loneliness and just experiencing it as like a heaviness in my body or like in my chest area versus trying to think through it. I'm sad because no one loves me. I'm going to be alone forever. I'm going to be stuck in this state forever. So it's like when we try and rationalize and think through it, we actually intensify it so much more that then we want to run back so much more. So it's actually learning how to feel safe in the emotions and stop getting stuck in the stories about it.
So true. Those stories. Dang, those stories can ride us in this loop, man. I've lived it. It's one part of why I do the work I
Yeah.
do as well. What else can you share about the work that you do and how you support clients?
Mhm. So I focus more on somatic therapy, and somatic therapy is just working with emotions in your body. Because, like I mentioned before, when you're in a toxic relationship and a trauma bond situation, it's not logic that's keeping you stuck. And it's not more of, let's talk about this. Let's try and dissect every single detail about what's happening, or learn about like all their manipulation tactics. Because as soon as you get triggered, that logical part of your mind that you're working so hard on in talk therapy, it literally goes offline. It checks out. And then the emotions just continue to drive your behavior. And this is why people are like, I've tried everything, nothing is working, I feel stuck, I know all this, but I'm still just repeating it. And it's not because, you're broken or this is just going to be your life forever. It's because you're not actually getting to the root cause of it. And a lot of these, attachment issues from childhood, they're deeply like suppressed in your body, and that's when it comes through a lot of these like huge anxiety spells and needing that person and all that. So through the somatic therapy, I help people actually release and process through, get to the root cause, and repair the experiences in childhood with their adult self now, like their adult self to their inner child. And this is what reprograms their whole definition of what love is. Your body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So even if I go back to those memories and I change the experience my younger self had, it's as if it's happening in real life. So that's how you start to regain back your self worth, learn that your worth is not tied to what you do in person, it's actually coming from within. So you're able to internalize it. And that's when everything really starts to change. So I use all kinds of different somatic therapies because I think, it's also the emotional regulation piece from the addiction, and then the somatic therapy to um, release those traumas.
Right. I love that kind of like holistic approach you're taking of really seeing it in multiple facets and holding for the bigness of everything that's happening, which is really amazing. Where can people find out more about you and the work you're doing?
So I'm mainly on Instagram at Emily Colligan Therapy. And on here, that's where I, give people free tools, free, like even healing meditations to learn how to start to do the work. And then I'm also offering group therapy sessions that delve all into these topics of, healing betrayal trauma, healing the addiction to external validation. So those are the next two ones that I'm having soon, and I'm just really excited to be able to give people these healing options and like actually a way out of it.
That's amazing. Well, if y'all are resonating, go check her out. Everything's going to be in the show notes down below. Emily, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your wisdom here on the podcast today. This was gold, literally, for anybody going through the trauma bonds or needing to get out of a narcissistic situation. So I know that a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Boom. Just like that, we done. Uh-oh, hold on.